Let's turn to our NBC News correspondents covering the two presidential campaigns. Alba is covering Vice President Harris, and Garrett Haake is covering former President Trump, and he's here with me on set. Thank you both so much for joining me. Monica, I want to start with you, though. The two big criticisms coming at the Harris campaign, right? Their lack of concrete policy plans or differences from President Biden, and the absence of any sit-down interviews. So does the campaign feel like they need to address these soon, or are they okay to continue to keep running on what we've seen in the last few weeks?
Well, it sounds like, Gabe, we're going to see the policy rollout first, and that's coming, according to Vice President Harris, sometime in the middle of this week. And I think it's by no accident that they're going to roll that out, let's say, sometime close to Wednesday. And then Vice President Harris is going to be appearing with President Biden in an official event in their official capacity in Maryland, talking largely about lowering costs for Americans. But it'll come at a time when Vice President Harris does know and acknowledges that she does want to put her own agenda out there for what she would do differently if she is elected to the White House, areas where likely she will say President Biden has been successful in some ways but couldn't go far enough in others, and here's what she would propose. But as we know, with all of these campaigns and with candidates, this is something that they can talk about and tout as wanting to do, but the reality of actually enacting it is a lot harder. But still, there are questions about where she stands on some of those things. So from an economic rollout perspective, that's likely to come first. And then in terms of your question about an interview, she has been taking a couple more questions just briefly in gaggles with reporters as they were traveling the last couple of days. But she is hoping to do a sit-down interview with her running mate, Governor Tim Walz, we're told, in the coming weeks. She says that she hopes that's on the books certainly by the end of August, but we know that the attention really largely will be on the DNC next week. Gabe.
You know, Monica, one policy we do have from Harris that differs from President Biden is her coming out in favor of Trump's no tax on tips idea. We mentioned that in the intro. What can you tell us about how that came to be?
Yeah, and it was interesting today at the White House press briefing. The press secretary was asked whether, if that was something, let's say, that was put into legislation, somehow passed and made it to the president's desk, would he, the current commander-in-chief, support that? And the White House said, yes, this is something that President Biden would be behind, too. But you're right, it's not like he was necessarily rolling that out as a policy platform or proposal when he was the candidate at the top of the ticket. So what the Harris-Walz campaign is saying now is that this is something that fits under the umbrella of wanting to propose things that would help working families, and certainly it's no accident that she talked about this in the state of Nevada, where this would really benefit the service industry there, and they're putting it into that larger context as well, Gabe.
So did they copy it from Trump?
They're not saying that, because they're saying essentially that if it's a good idea, it can be a good idea on its own. They're saying, and in a maybe ironic moment, that if it happens to be something where there's an area of agreement, then that may be one of the only things that the two would agree on.
Certainly a very rare agreement. You know, Monica, before I let you go, one person we did hear from over the weekend was President Biden. He talked at length about his decision not to run and his thoughts on Trump. What else did he say?
Yeah, and we know that there were going to be these reflective moments from President Biden talking about this, and he had promised to be a sort of transition candidate, and now, of course, he's decided to leave the race altogether. Here's a little bit more of what he had to say in that interview that aired on Sunday.
Look, the polls we had showed that it was a neck-and-neck race. Would have been down to the wire. But what happened was a number of my Democratic colleagues in the House and Senate thought that I was going to hurt them in the races. And I was concerned if I stayed in the race, that would be the topic you'd be interviewing me about. It's a great honor being president. I think I have an obligation to the country to do the most important thing to do, and that is we must defeat Trump.
So President Biden really putting that in the context of what maybe people like former Speaker Nancy Pelosi had been talking about for some time before he ultimately made that decision, which was this concern that his decision to stay in the race, had he maintained his reelection bid, how that would have really hurt races in the Senate and in the House. And ultimately, that's something the president says did weigh on him to decide the way he went. Gabe.
Alba, live for us at the White House. Monica, thank you. I want to turn now to Garrett Haake, who, as we said, covers the Trump campaign. So Garrett, based on your reporting, has the Harris campaign managed to get under the skin of Donald Trump?
I think that's obvious. It's evident from the way he's behaved on social media, the way he's behaved on the campaign trail, and the delta we see from what his campaign says is their plan for taking on Harris going forward, and the way in which he, the candidate, is choosing to do it. The Trump campaign's plan here is to be a little bit of strategic patience to get through the convention. They know that Harris is going to continue this honeymoon, probably get a bump coming out of that, and then try to go after her for her policies, for tying her to Biden and so forth. Donald Trump, I think, is quite clearly cannot wait that long, and he's trying to use every other opportunity to bring up some other issue.
So speaking of opportunities, I want you to shed some light on this because you seem to have as good an insight as any into Donald Trump's brain. The AI-generated image on the, the allegation that somehow these crowds are AI-generated. What's he getting at here?
I don't know that he's getting at anything. I think this is one of those things where crowd size is probably the single most important metric in his mind to talk about somebody's political strength. And it doesn't compute to him that Harris would have the same ability to draw a crowd that he does. I also think this is a function of the fact that despite the best efforts of this campaign structure, which is better than last campaign structures, nobody's able to stop him from all the incoming he gets, including from some of the most not just even far right's like not even fair. Like the most outlandish thinkers, let's say, on the internet still have his number and can still get ideas in front of him and from their lips to his Twitter account.
Is it possible, though, also that he's doing this as a way to sow doubt within his own followers who are very likely to believe something that he says, and that way that's a way to blunt the impact of these large crowds?
I think that's possible, and I've seen it written that this is also part of him laying the groundwork for if he could eventually lose this race. Look, all of a sudden there was all this cheating. You know, it harkens back to the whole stop the steal idea here. How could I, Donald Trump, have lost to somebody like Joe Biden? How could I, Donald Trump, have gotten fewer, people at my rallies than somebody like Kamala Harris? Perhaps I didn't. And
right.
It's almost like a permission structure to doubt what your own eyes are seeing for his most hardcore followers. But I don't think it's that strategic, Gabe. I think that's important to remember. I don't think there's some grand plan about this. A lot of this is just done by feel when it's Trump.
All right. So talking about a grand plan, tonight, he is set to be interviewed by Elon Musk. What can you tell me about that?
Not known as one of the great interviewers of our time,
right.
let's say, but he does have an enormous platform, and a platform used by the people that the Trump campaign is trying to target. The Trump campaign is not interested necessarily in finding viewers of a program like this one. Their strategy hinges in part on activating voters, or perhaps not even voters, but people who could be Trump voters who are often young, male, disaffected from the regular news cycle. A lot of those people are on streaming platforms and on places like Twitter. So it's an opportunity to reach an audience that might not otherwise be paying attention to news. But I got to tell you, it is a total unknown. Obviously, Musk was not always a Trump fan. He is now. Who knows what topics might come up on this? I'm sure the Trump campaign doesn't. It seems like a high-risk, open-ended question of the reward.
Yeah, certainly high risk because it worked so well for Ron DeSantis.
Well, yeah, exactly. Not exactly but I will say Musk has said he is pressure testing the systems. He has posted this himself to make sure we don't have at least the technical issues that bedeviled that event.
All right, we'll have to see. Garrett,
yeah, we'll be watching.
Thank you so much for joining me here on set. We really appreciate it. And I want to bring in a couple of our resident experts. Mark Murray is also here, senior political editor here at NBC News, and Steve Liesman, senior economics reporter at CNBC. Mark, I do want to start with you. What can you tell me more about this New York Times Siena poll numbers you flagged, the 3 key swing states? What is so significant about this shift in the race? Still within the margin of error, but how big a deal is that shift?
It's notable because back in May and then even in Pennsylvania in July, you ended up having a situation where Donald Trump was in the lead. Again, within the margin of error, still a very competitive race. But this is just more evidence this has been a reset contest with Kamala Harris now becoming the Democratic Party's standard bearer. But Gabe, there's actually something even more significant to me in that poll beyond the horse race numbers, and that is Kamala Harris's favorability numbers. She has skyrocketed to actually have a net positive favorability rating. President Biden, the last poll in Pennsylvania had him at -20 net negative rating for him. She's now at +2 in Pennsylvania. And so that's just a marked contest. And what's also notable is that Donald Trump is pretty much at the same position he was in July versus now. And so to me, one of the key indicating points and one of the key questions that we're going to end up having is, do those numbers continue to stand for Harris, or do they end up changing after 3 months?
So that favorability big bump for Harris. What do you attribute that to? Is she essentially running like a generic Democrat, or is it that she's not Joe Biden, so that's what's leading to this? What do you make of it?
I think a little bit, yes. She is running as that generic Democrat, as Nate Cohn in the New York Times kind of put it. And Gabe, we've actually seen Democratic down ballot candidates, whether in Ohio, like Sherrod Brown, you end up having John Tester in Montana, you end up having, Tammy Baldwin in Wisconsin. All these Democrats have been outrunning President Biden when he was at the top of the ticket. Now, all of a sudden, you remove President Biden, and Harris is also doing pretty well. But again, part of being a generic candidate is, your record hasn't been litigated. You haven't gone through the ringer of opposition research, really bad news environments. And as we know in this kind of campaign world, Gabe, you have some good days and you also have some bad days, even for the successful candidates. And Harris has yet to actually, at the top of the ticket, had a really bad day as a candidate. And that probably will change over the next 3 months.
Yeah, that's right. Mark Murray, thank you so much. I want to bring in Steve Liesman. CNBC has their own poll of swing voters, Steve. Nationwide, you also saw a big disparity between their net approval ratings when it comes to swing voters. So what can you tell us about all that?
Yeah, this is a subgroup of our general national poll of 1,000 voters nationwide, and it represents 20% of our poll. So just need to know that our margin of error is higher for this. It's 3.1 for the full poll, but 7% for this subgroup. We represent 20% of voters. Interestingly, 31% of Latinos fall into this group of independents, ticket splitters, and undecided for president. And what we found is they don't like Donald Trump very much. We find the approval rating of the net approval rating of Vice President Harris at -9. For Trump, it's -39. And net approval, of course, is approval minus disapproval. They do give Trump the edge when it comes to who would be best for your financial future, 28-8. But look at the percentage there. I don't know if you have it there. That shows how much many don't think it matters at all. To me, this says it's wide open for either candidate to capture the imagination of the swing voter group.
And Steve, I'm going to ask you to put your CNBC hat on. Both Harris and Trump have come out for ending taxes on tips. From a policy perspective, though, can you tell us what that would mean and what impacts it would have on the government's bottom line?
Well, think about maybe a physicist who gets to witness the birth of a star. As an economics reporter, I'm witnessing, the birth of another part of the budget deficit. That's one way to think about it. This is how this happens. The polls on the campaign trail end up making promises, and that ends up having, if it becomes law, obviously, profound effects, perhaps it's $150 to $200 billion I've seen over a 10-year period on the budget deficit. Other distortions happen because of it. You treat like jobs in different ways from a taxation point of view. It is not a beloved proposal by economists. However, it seems to be perhaps beloved by politicians.
And Mark, look, we were talking earlier about Kamala Harris as a generic Democrat. Is she running as a change candidate, even as an incumbent vice president? How is that going to work? How is that really possible?
Yeah, Gabe, she certainly represents change from President Biden, right? And so there's that part of the equation. But outside of the change, the way that I've almost been viewing this presidential contest is who's a referendum on? And from the data that I've actually seen in our poll and others, this was looking to be a referendum on President Joe Biden. You remove him from the equation, he exits the ballot, and all of a sudden now this looks more like a referendum on Donald Trump than it certainly was before. I think the question is, and we're going to end up seeing the Trump campaign try to litigate Harris and try to turn this back into a referendum on her. But I think that is, to me, the biggest change is that we've gone from a referendum on Biden to more of a referendum on Donald Trump.
Okay, and one more question before you go. We've been talking about a key voting group for Kamala Harris will be young voters. You had your eye on one group of young voters that came here for a deliberative poll. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, Gabe, this is a kind of a different poll than we always talk about that Steve and I were talking about when people call you up and you give them your responses. This is a poll where people actually gather into one hotel conference room or one convention area over a 3 or 4 day period. And NBC News got to witness this. Our colleague Savannah Sellers is going to have a piece on this on Nightly News tonight. There's going to be some really interesting polling results. But in the past, these deliberative polls are, America in one room, is that when you end up deliberating and talking about issues and even debating, that you actually become a little bit more moderate in your own tone. You respect other people's opinions, even ones you might disagree with. Completely different from our social media feeds that we end up seeing. But seeing this live and when the results come out, I think it's going to be really fascinating. But some different attitudes that we normally have when we put away our phones and actually start talking to other people.
Face-to-face interaction. You don't say, Mark.
It's great, Gabe.
Mark Murray, thank you so much. Steve Liesman as well. We really appreciate your time.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.